What's up, YouTube? Mr. Lamessi here, and today is May 30th, which means we can talk about Diablo 4 and our full experience through the reviewers' beta access point piece, whatever it was. Now, I will say this. I have a newborn baby, and unfortunately, I did not get to do a full great playthrough of all of it with the reviewers' access. I feel bad. I feel like, man, somebody else should have just taken this from me instead. So I do wish that they had just given it to someone else, and then I could do the race for first 1,000 hardcore as well. But that is okay. I still got to play through a little bit, and I do think it was helpful because it did give me an appreciation for the story and the game in a more solo sort of way, right? So I will start off by saying that I found that originally I'd been pretty critical of the grayed out graphics, and I still think at times they're a little too overly gray, right? I still think that is the case in some of the areas. But I did find that when I was just solo playing through the game, not streaming it, not having people to chat with, not having anybody around, and I was just sitting in my room, kind of in the dark, playing, I found that it really did give a different feeling to the game. I felt very immersed in that instance, in that time of it, and the grayness and the overcast and all of that, I think actually did play a really cool piece in helping that be kind of feeling desolate and stuff. So I thought that made the experience actually really interesting in that way. I still have a lot of my original thoughts around pieces of the game. I mean, I do think that they improved, like I talked about before, they improved the dungeons now. A lot of the dungeons, not all of them, but a lot of them do feel a little bit better. With how they kind of redesigned them. I think that was an improvement. The font, I think, has definitely been improved as well. But I still have overall, just different ideas and disagreements with how itemization still kind of goes. I still feel, just iffy. Some of it still feels like a mobile UI to me. And there's still just kind of certain feelings about the game that I still just have from that. Now, again, I didn't get to go 1 to 100 and do the whole, piece. I didn't get to play nearly as much with the review as I would want to, but I have been able to see other people, and I want to as well kind of show that, because that is going to lead into certain points that I have, which I'll even just kind of mention right now. I think getting to balance and stuff and PvP is going to be very difficult. We are already seeing people do billions of damage, which is really sad to me because that's something that the devs specifically pointed out and talked about, saying we're going to balance down the numbers because Diablo 3, the numbers went insane, right? And then it just got out of whack and it was all crazy. And so I was really hoping that numbers would come back into a better balance, but it doesn't feel like that really is the case. And with that leads me to really be scared for like PvP, because if I'm doing 10 million damage and you're doing 6 billion damage, what's the difference between 6 billion and 10 million? About 6 billion, right? And so there's like, it kind of has that same scaling that D3 has in that way, and that is a bit, again, it's like, how do you really balance that? Will PvP just become a giant mess? Will they actually have a really good way to balance it? I don't know. So that's a little worrisome. Overall as well, I would say like Diablo 4 is Diablo 3, but improved. That is really how it feels, and what I've seen and watched from other streamers and just other people playing through the game and all of this stuff. It really feels like they took Diablo 3 and they improved it and made it better. Again, for people who love Diablo 3, I think this is fantastic, right? For people who don't like Diablo 3, I think you may enjoy some of the playthrough of Diablo 4, but I think ultimately you're going to get into that same end game space where instead of doing greater rifts, you're doing nightmare dungeons. But if you watch a Nightmare Dungeon, a lot of times you'll look and be like, this kind of feels like just a Greater Rift, right? It just kind of feels similar. Again, I'm not saying that is wrong, that is bad. But it is something that does feel that way. But it is a little bit harder. I would also say just overall, right? It is like they've made the game more difficult. Maybe going back to old school D3 where it was harder at first, and then will it get easier and all of this? Potentially. So regardless, the person I would love to start off and react to whatever is my man Rob. Rob is a beast. Even when D2's out, he's beasting. He just beasts through everything. So I'd love to go through his little Nightmare Dungeon tier 100 clear Whirlwind Barbarian and just kind of talk through this video, because I think he is a great example of showing what the end game will be like. Now remember, we had reviewer access for I think 9 days. So this is 9 days of Rob playing. I don't know how many hours exactly he played. I don't know if he, grouped all the way there or if he just soloed all the way to there. I'm not sure. But this is his kind of play. So the first thing is to just, look at the overall piece. Again, I think it looks a little mobile-y, personally. Especially with all the stars on the equipment and things like that. Yeah. You can also see that pretty much every single thing he's using is just a 5-star legendary. So that as well, the idea of magic items and rare items being usable and stuff in the end game, I think really is gone. And then you just kind of have your simple attack, power, armor, life, and then your just stats right here. So regardless, let's take a watch of Rob here.
Hey everybody, Rob here. Like I mentioned in my previous videos, I've been playing and testing the pre-launch version of Diablo 4.
God, he's quiet.
I've taken an in-depth look at the Barbarian class. One of the strongest builds I've found there is...
Can you hear him now? I can barely hear him.
The Whirlwind Barbarian, which is very good news to me because I love the spin to win playstyle. I already made a build guide video explaining the full guide in detail. You can see that somewhere around here.
We'll just have to be quiet, I guess.
But I will also provide a short overview at the end.
Okay.
I have some footage here. I don't know if this is going to be the final tier, but...
So this is Whirlwind Barbarian.
And
it very much feels like D3, this piece, I think.
It was definitely quite challenging in terms of toughness, and you really had to, have a fully built out and decked out character to even have a chance of clearing it. So yeah, in the background here you will see the footage that I'll be playing now, and I will try to go with the footage and try to explain to you what's even going on. So let's go. So first thing here, this is a Nightmare Sigil. I'm pretty sure you've seen screenshots of this. They're basically the keys you need.
I mean, I don't think I can turn up the volume any more than it is. I'm maxed out there. I'm maxed out here. Can I do let me see, properties, an audio boost. Add gain. All right, let's see if this is awful.
Need to enter the dungeons, and like you can see here, this is a tier 100 key, which I said earlier, is the highest one that is currently available. You can see there is always a positive effects here, using evade leaves the pool behind the damages enemies, and then there's a lot of negativity. So these are not really too bad for me.
Okay,
the only effects here that it really sucks is the duration of the vulnerable effect is reduced by 60%. That's pretty significant. Because I do basically a lot of vulnerable damage. But this was the only 100 key that I had, because like I said, it wasn't easy to play all the way up to those tiers. And even to craft them, you have a 1 in 10 chance to get them, and it costs a lot of materials. So you basically right click this key, it will consume the sigil, it will mark the dungeon on the map. You can see where it is.
So then you have to go to the nearest
waypoint. And actually here I think I misclicked. So it didn't take me to the waypoint, but now I'm at the waypoint and I'm just like basically going to the dungeon. You can always use your horse to travel there faster. And what I like to do, you can like leave these little markers on the map. Those really like help a lot to just navigate. They give you like an approximate line. You can see it up here in the minimap.
Yeah, the
like
line in the top right as well is something that I feel like feels very mobile game-ish, or just, I don't know, it's like the modern. Everything is just, I expect the next thing is you push the button and it just auto runs to the spot.
100% accurate.
It's
but
very
still,
modern.
It's pretty decent. You also have a speed boost on your horse here that I can activate with my spacebar. Like you notice when I activate it, my horse is like.
I really wish that they gave
faster.
us
I would say like
a map on top though.
The movement speed.
Sure.
Okay, and then here we load into the dungeon. So you can see now that we are at the entrance.
So this is a level 100 dungeon. Now again, this is going to be hard. Like,
and there is only a certain amount of revives you have in each dungeon. If you die 4 times, you cannot reset. The dungeon is a fail, the key is lost, the clear has not been completed. Right. So you can see right away here, I'm playing triple shout. I'm basically shouting to get my fury, to get my toughness. And then these are like the first trash monsters. And you see my damage is actually kind of good here on this tier. You see it vulnerable, procs instantly, it's from my Paragon Glyph. You see, like, I can like kind of kill these monsters very nicely. And you can see, like, I'm playing a bleed build. Like, these guys are all bleeding, basically, taking extra damage. And what I always try to do is to accumulate as much damage with my Whirlwind because of my Gore Gloves that basically make you stack all this damage and then release it in like a fiery explosion around your characters. So you see here, this room has a lot of elites. And we're struggling quite a bit. Also, I apologize for the footage here. It's cut.
Now, this is what I'm saying. Does this not look exactly like Diablo 3?
This damage and then release it in like a fiery explosion around your characters. So you see here,
I think I have made this build in Diablo 3 already.
We're struggling quite a bit. Also, I apologize for the footage here. It's cutting out some, like losing some bitrate or something sometimes. I got a blast wave shrine here, so that one really helps out a lot. The wave itself does like damage in the millions, which is like really good, especially for this pack because there's like 5 elites here, 1 pixel. You can see my life. If I'm spending too much time in there, I'm definitely dying very quickly. I also have the iron skin here. It gives me a barrier, which is like very helpful. It gives me some damage. It also gives me some more toughness. And yeah, the first objective, I almost died there. The first objective here is to free like prisoners. I have 4 left. And you can see here, I really need to be like mindful and careful.
I mean, his life is getting wrecked,
really
for
have
sure.
My buffs up. In order to even like stand in there for like a second, because else I just die. And yeah, the Barb is really reliant on challenging shout here. If I wouldn't have had a challenging shout, I would pretty much die like in 1 shot essentially, because they even take half my life with challenging shout and gives me about 80% damage reduction with my current stacking of skill ranks there. So you notice here, I'm always trying to lure the way or kill the monsters before I click the objectives, because if they touch me without my buffs up, like I'm insta-dead. Then these elites here, I can like...
And then it's like, okay, so now you're having to build purely around having these buffs up. Does that become a full requirement? Because he's getting wrecked even with those buffs up a little bit.
Comfortably skip, because you don't need to kill every elite. In fact, the elites are like very, very dangerous here. And I was mainly focusing on the objectives to kill the final boss, to get the experience, to get the glyph experience, to get the upgrades and all that stuff.
You can turn damage numbers off, but you cannot turn things like immune, dodge, like those things off.
This pull, you can see me like doing quite some good amount of damage, because I managed to accumulate quite a lot of damage here with these trash monsters and explode them. But then they also explode me, so you see how easy it can be to die here, basically. But yeah, if we watch that one final time, we're gonna try to stop. You see, there's like a 600 million explosion of.
So we already have 633 million damage. Which again, my question was, I thought we were supposed to be tuning the numbers down. And this isn't even the most damage. People are doing in the billions already.
Accumulated damage I did with Whirlwind. And then I think they do some poison explosion or something that basically one-shots me, even though I had my buffs up. So yeah, if you die, you... Sometimes there's a checkpoint, I'm not really sure about the exact mechanics, but most of the time I just respawn at the beginning of a dungeon. And you see I only have 3 revives left now, 1 is gone. So if I die 3 more times, the run is over, but
right.
Yeah, thankfully I managed to, like, I think I avoided further death. But yeah, you can see here, like, I was trying a bit in the 90s and my equipment is not broken, it would be red, it's like orange, so it's like close to breaking, so I definitely, like, shouldn't die anymore.
Jesus, look at his life going through that pack.
It would be red, it's like orange, so it's like close to breaking, so I definitely...
So he actually dies there, right? Does like a cheat death go off or something?
Like, shouldn't die anymore. And you see here, like, they touch me and the damage is insane. Like, without my barrier, without my fortify.
That's poison, so he's,
I would be
okay.
dead there, right there. So that's why I stack all these defensive buffs. They're just required. Here again, this elite is applying some poison that really, really hurts. Okay, here's the next objective. I have to kill these ward things. And I think here I also gathered, like, quite a lot of elites. So it's mostly about surviving in these tiers. Like, my DPS, at least on this Whirlwind build I'm playing, and also other builds. I was playing a Rend Bleed build, and also a Hammer of the Ancients build, and they were similar in DPS output. A bit worse in, like, movement speed and stuff, but DPS output was actually rather similar.
I mean, the damage that he's taking, it does seem quite quite brutal there.
But yeah, you see here I have to do quite a bit of kiting.
But that's also with all of these shouts and massive damage reduction. So
I can't just, like, face tank at everything.
Yeah, there's no face tank whatsoever here.
And yeah, these elites are very hard to kill. So I decide to skip them, basically. I only have 1 objective left before I have to fight the boss. And this build is really like an AoE focused build, but you will see later on the boss fight. I just realized that there was no objective down here, so I need to head up again. And then you can see, like, all my buffs up here. Like, this is an armor buff here, it gives me lots of toughness. These are my this is my challenging shot, gives me another toughness buff. Damage buff, this is berserking. This other one is a bleed buff that I get.
Okay,
buff.
let's see here.
Or buff here, it gives me lots of toughness. These are my this is my challenging shot, gives me another toughness buff. Damage buff, this is berserking. This other one is a bleed buff that I get. This one is limitless rage, the 60 stacks. I'll go over the gear, or you check out the video.
That's a lot of buffs he's got going.
I posted a couple days ago. And yeah, the final objective here is on the left side. So I'm trying to clear that one. And if there's good density...
Hold on.
So I'm trying to clear that one. And if there's good density, I'm doing good damage. It's very similar to, like, the Barber in Diablo 3, if you're familiar. Like, you basically accumulate damage on trash, then you kill it. With a big explosion.
2 billion.
But here you can see
right?
on the boss fight, my damage is not the best. I'm still getting, like, some decent bleeds in. And I have to dodge a couple things here because I do have challenging shout, like, downtime when there's only 1 target. Right now I have it permanently. But sometimes if it's a single target, because he has ads, and I should really wait for the ads before I activate my Warcries. You can see here if the boss HP bar turns blue, that's where I'm doing my most damage, because that's where I apply vulnerable. But it's on lucky hits, so I don't have it permanently. So here I managed to stagger the boss, which also helps a lot with damage, and he was vulnerable as well, so that was like some good chunk of DPS, but I really have to be careful, because if I get hit by his poisons attacks, I'm most likely one-shot. So I have to, like, dodge a bit. I'm always going behind this pillar, because yeah, it's really, really helpful to avoid his attacks. And yeah, we're just, like, basically spinning on him, fighting him, and you see, like, when there's vulnerable, I'm doing like 1.5 million hits, and then my bleed is doing, like, pretty decent damage. It's ticking for like 150k, like twice a second as well. So it's like some very nice additional, like, bleed damage right on the target. And yeah, we are just, like, trying to not die, trying to keep.
Slither is the
up,
Rift Guardian
and,
from D3.
Definitely don't want to be standing in these poison things. And here I managed to stagger the boss a second time. This is due to my shouts. Because passing them this often
That
adds to the stagger bar.
The
of
stagger
boss.
on boss
And,
is interesting.
Man, we managed to clear the Nightmare Dungeon 100. This was the highest tier again in this version, and there's also an achievement, Nightmare Grandmaster, that you unlock when you cleared it. So this is my first clear. And then you can see you get some rewards like XP and golds and a legendary item, a rare item. And I also got another key, Nightmare Dungeon key. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think the tier 100 always drops another tier 100. And it never goes to tier 101. So I assume for now that's the max. And you can see the stats here. Like, this is actually pretty decent stats. 9 crit chance as a positive buff, and the rest isn't too bad. The barrier one can hurt a bit, but overall not too bad a key. And yeah, I'm gonna now go over the build.
All right, so now you can take a look at the build. So, like I say, when I watch through this game is really made for me, that's totally fine. I agree. I think this game is made for the Diablo 3 player, for sure. Because when I watched that whole playthrough right there, I just saw Diablo 3. That's just what I saw. That was a greater rift to me. But like a really hard one. Like the damage that he was taking was like a lot, right? The damage he was taking was almost worrisome to the point of like, how are some of these builds going to survive in there at all? Right? So you really, it does feel like you really need to build defensively. Which, you know, that, like, there's definitely some skill within how you're moving around in that dungeon, how you're placing yourself, where you're fighting the monsters, all of that. But there's also, like, it's going to be hard. First 1,000 people to get to 100 and complete this, I think will be kind of tough in hardcore there. There's going to be a lot of people that die along the way. But at the same time, that still looked just like Diablo 3 to me. Like, everything about that barb going through, even the slither, which is apparently a Rift Guardian. It is in no way D3. That's your opinion. We have different opinions on that.
Quick.
Let's take a look.
Just hovering here. Item by item. Like, again, I have a full video explaining like how this build works.
So we've got unique.
But yeah, this gloves. Is basically the core item of this build. Like, this unique gloves really like enables the build.
So 4 ranks of Whirlwind. Whirlwind explodes after it ends, dealing 60% of the total base damage dealt to surrounding enemies as fire damage. Okay, that's really, like, yeah, that is you need that for the build. And that is something as well with Diablo 4. They're taking a lot of, they're putting a lot of like skill modifier things on these items. And that becomes this piece where, you know, without this build is nothing really. Like, you have to do a completely different piece with it.
To be able to like clear this high, even because, like I said, you can accumulate the damage on trash monsters. Like, let's say I'm whirlwinding on 100 small spiders. I'm doing like hundreds and ticks of damage in millions, and then I accumulate them all, and 60% of it I can release at will whenever I let go of my whirlwind button, and I can one-shot elites, I can one-shot probably even bosses with that if you manage to like snapshot it or take the damage while you whirlwind into the boss room. I've done it before. It's possible, but it's hard. It really depends on the dungeon. And then here, this is another unique that gives you barrier. Whenever you heal above maximum life, has a really nice synergy with some bar passives with the shouts as well, because they heal you constantly and they become really strong. But again, guys, like, these are like 2 unique items. You might not find them like very fast. It may take a couple hours, a couple more hours, couple weeks maybe even. So this is like an end game build. Boots, movement speed, you can see here all the multipliers, basically more DPS, more...
Let's go through those items he shows us really fast.
A couple weeks maybe even. So this is like an end game build.
Alright. Evade grants 75% movement speed for 1 second. 10% fury cost reduction. 26.2% movement speed. 26 all stats. 27% movement speed for 4 seconds after killing an elite. While unstoppable. And for 4 seconds after you gain 25% plus 10 to 25% increased movement speed and can freely move through enemies. Oh, no. It's while unstoppable and for 4 seconds after you gain that. So really, that's just a lot of move speed on some conditions. Here's mace, damage, overpower damage, vulnerable damage, critical strike damage, core skill damage, damage to crowd controlled enemies. Imprinted whirlwind's critical strike chances increased by 20%. For each second it is channeled up to 80%.
Boots move.
And then it looks like every gem he has is 12% critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. 30% crit strike, vulnerable damage,
speed, you can...
strength, crit strike damage, crit damage, damage to close enemies, vulnerable damage, strength. Imprinted, deal 25% increased damage active while you have a barrier, so that goes well with the barrier that he has. Crit strike damage, strength, damage to close enemies, vulnerable damage, crit strike damage. Each point of fury you generate while at maximum fury grants your next core skill 4% increased damage up to 60%, with more crit strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And then some cold and light res, crit strike, chance. So a lot of crit with this build, and damage, vulnerable damage, and resource gen. Your shout skills generate fury while active. So the rings, it really looks like 35 cold, 35 fire, 35 fire, 35 light. That seems to just be the, like, you just get those two. Resource gen, damage to bleeding enemies, vulnerable damage, crit strike damage. Whenever you cast a shout skill, its cooldown is reduced by 5.4 seconds per nearby enemy. Oh, up to a maximum of 12 seconds. So that really helps as well for that. And 26 resists to all elements, cooldown reduction, damage reduction, +3 rank of defensive skills, fury cost reduction. Skills deal up to 30% increased damage based on your available primary resource when cast. Receiving the maximum benefit while you have full primary resource. So it definitely seems like having full fury is big on this build. Oh wait, he's muted. Oops.
All the multipliers, basically more DPS, more fury regeneration, attack power. Armor.
Okay, strength increases skill damage by 106.5%, increases armor by 1065.
Or I have
intelligence,
like
increases resistances.
Well, 1k main stat even.
Willpower was resource gen.
And then here, what's really important as well is the crit chance. And you can see here, I have, even though I have the weapon that gives me up to 80% when I channel for a long time, I still want to have a very high base crit chance. So I only need to channel for like 2 seconds to be at 100% efficiency, especially like during speedrun content. And
okay, so it's a 100% crit build when he's been spinning for 2 seconds. I see.
And even this high nightmare dungeon, it doesn't really like take that long, you know, like in D3.
And 475%
I can do it in like 5 minutes basically, or the highest tier. But we'll see if that's going to change in the future. The second thing I'm stacking is vulnerable damage, because it is a separate multiplier to other sources of damage. And
yeah, vulnerable is apparently really, really good in the game because it's its own bucket, and so that's a massive multiplier. So when you're multiplying the damage, you get that 455% there, and then the 475% from the crit, and then the 294 from the whatever. I actually don't think overpower works in that way, but so you just get to multiply across all those buckets. So vulnerable is really another like good bucket too.
It's just a really, really strong stat on the Barb, especially because you have like 4 weapons and you can like stack 400. One thing I forgot about the crit damage is that I have not been able to find the grandfather. And according to some data mines, the grandfather gives you a double multiplier on crit damage. So potentially the Barb, if it really works like that as a separate multiplier, it could reach 1,000 crit damage. That would mean that every crit basically does more than 10 times of your base damage. That would be insane. But yeah, I have not found it here. And obviously, you have to drop another aspect if you want to get that in. Yeah, damage to close, damage to crowd-controlled enemies, like that kind of stuff I'm stacking. Damage to bleeding enemies is fine as well, because I'm constantly bleeding everything with my whirlwind. Yeah, it's just like some mats that I farmed. The expertise slot, also more damage to vulnerable. This is a separate multiplier, really good. 200 sword is what I'm using in my main hand. This is inflicting some parts of the bleed, the other part is coming from my whirlwind skill, and it's also increasing bleed damage again. And it's a slashing weapon that you need to have the whirlwind that I'm playing active. So you see here, I'm going way too fast. Sorry about that. Hopefully I'll manage to stop this time. Need to have the good reaction times here. Yeah, okay. You see here, like, barely you can see it. When using a slashing weapon, whirlwind inflicts 40% of its base as bleeding damage.
Right, okay.
Eat the... I did it many times.
So this is going through the skill tree, just like what his build is exactly.
This one is insane as well. And as my ultimate, I'm using Wrath of the Berserk. I'm spending a lot of Fury with Unbridled Rage. So I'm also generating a lot of Fury. On the other hand, with like Rallying Cry and various sources from my Paragon, from the gear. So this effect here really comes online. You spend 50 Fury and you get a damage
Every
bonus.
50
You get some
Fury you
movements.
spend
You get
increases
even more
the
Fury
damage by
generation.
25%.
So, this thing is insane. Like, it boosts my damage by so much. Yeah, and then the Unbridled Rage... it's just so strong. Like, you spend more Fury, but that can actually be like, a good thing as well, because you can heal with spending Fury. You can activate like various other effects when you spend and then generate Fury at the same time. And obviously this one has a very strong multiplier. More weight, because the Paragon board system can be rather complicated, and you can go very in-depth and min-max a lot there. So I'm probably gonna make it's just 5 times. I will do that going forward. So from that, obviously it's in the planner. So you can see on the starter board I have closed enemies. Like, obviously with Whirlwind we're always in melee range, and yeah, we really benefit also from
the damage reduction. 117% damage to close enemies. For every 5 dexterity purchased within range, you deal 15% increased damage. Okay. And that's, you need to purchase at least 25 dexterity to get that
reduction
bonus.
Here that we have. We take this in the starter board because it's very efficient to just spec 39 decks. There could be other boards where you can get more decks, but you have to have the starter board, and I think this is the best glyph. A deck scaling 1 to Marshall. This one gives shout cooldown reduction.
Damage, armor,
it has armor and physical.
Power after casting a shout skill. Every other shout skill is cooldowns reduced.
So you can also put next board is the Warbringer board. This is
for every 75 Fury you spend, gain 12% of your max life as Fortify. So again, this is kind of a spend all your Fury, but everything be...
So what enables a lot of Fury to spend when you use it more.
And it just does a lot for you.
And here are some Fortify notes, and here's Hunter Killer, more elite damage. This one...
More vulnerable damage, they become vulnerable.
Yeah. Kill damage reduction. The one is a core skill.
Crit strike damage with core skills, 225%. And skills that critically strike generate 3 Fury.
The fire after barrier, like, they need to damage me quite a bit before probably 100. I now get my reward. I can upgrade my glyphs. I'm upgrading Wrath for more damage with more crit damage with core skills. And then yeah, I got the new consumable. Couple of like 80s, 90s, 100s. I've been playing loads. And yeah, it's some pretty good stuff. And yeah, you can see here, like, I didn't like even finish all my renown, so all the regions I have not done the last thing because it takes long. But yeah, guys, this was the showcase of the Nightmare Dungeon 100 clear. I hope you liked the video. I have a lot more content coming over the next days here, and I'll be blasting, I'll be streaming the entire launch, and it's gonna be amazing, guys. Get the game, tune in, play. You're gonna have a good time. It's gonna be fantastic.
Well, there you go. So, Thank you, Rob. Here we can see 1.6 billion damage.
Hey everybody, it's Rob here.
Efficient
Build
leveling
explanation
strategy.
video, like get an extra buff when you're in the party. A lot of experienced players. There we have it, guys. I mean, like I said, this was only like 15-20% of the level, so but you get the idea of
Butcher
to the
gets one
XP
shot
like
with
on
250
level
million
when I
crit.
was level 80, like I had to stand in this bubble like I'm doing here. I had to always go back for it, but now I can, in most cases, just ignore it. Like there, when you run, I don't have to just keep close, keep going, slay monsters, and get the XP. You notice here we get pretty close. The XP required is, I think, 22. Yeah. Like, but you get the idea of it's quite a bit faster if you're grinding from 98. But you get the idea of like the last level, like 20% of the level. So
I don't know.
but you get the idea of like the last level, like pretty close. Why not? But like if it happens, why am I in a run? I don't have to backtrack. I don't have to stay there and wait in the bubble for 5 seconds until the lightning comes from the sky. No, I can just keep going, slay monsters. The required is, I think, 22 million. I hover it again. I have a list for you in a second. I compiled a whole table of XP. Okay, and there it is, level 100. Boom, another Paragon point. Now it...
Maybe it's at the start of it. So...
Storm here that procs, like... I can completely ignore it because my character is so strong. Finding a unique here, by the way. My character is so strong that I have enough toughness to just tank them.
That was probably him. It's hard to see. Alright, I don't think we need to go further down that. Gaming Trend gives it 10 out of 10. Video Gamer gives it 10 out of 10. Tech Raptor gives it 9.5. MP First gives it 9.5. Dexerto 5 out of 5. VGC 5 out of 5. Windows Central 5 out of 5. Screen Rant, Twinfinite, Press Start, Prima Games, IGN 9 out of 10. So, there you go. There you go. Again, to sum it up, I'm not going to sit here and crap all over the game. I'm not going to sit here and say a bunch of terrible things about the game. I'm not going to hate all over D4. I think, to me, watching Rob go through all of that, it was hard to see anything other than a Diablo 3 Rift. Seeing the numbers, the items, obviously it wasn't sets, but seeing all of the affixes and the 500% crit damage and all of this, seeing the millions of damage and billions of damage being done as he's spinning around and everything's gathering and stuff is all over. It just looked and felt D3 to me. I think that doesn't mean it's a bad game. I think if you love Diablo 3, you're going to love this game. Plain and simple. I think because it looks like just a harder, better looking version of D3. Right? Like, plain and simple. It just looks like a harder, better version with more monetization, though. You do have the battle passes and the cosmetics and all the pieces in there. But I think it's D3 evolved. I think as well, if you played Diablo Immortal, you would see much of Diablo Immortal in this game. Again, not the like pay to win piece. Whenever I say that, everybody's like, "Oh, you mean no Diablo Immortal? You had to put money to." I'm like, not that piece. Just like look at the game. Look at what it looks like when you're playing through the game. I think there's the similar feel there. For me as well, it's maybe a little too complex. I'm a little dumb, and the complexity of the game and all the pieces, it goes a little yeah, like I just want to spam my blizzards, you know? Make it simple. There's a lot of stacking and a lot of theory and the idea. I mean, Rob going through his build there again, he's like, all right, so this generates the fury, and when the fury is generated, then I have these 10 other things. This one heals me, this one grants me fortify, and whenever I'm granted fortify, I also get barrier from this piece over here, and then I have these gloves that do this, and so if I find these, then my boots as well, every time that I gain life, I get an additional 4% for every time that the life is gained. And then whenever there's lucky hit from this, there's a lot of that. And I think for some people, they love it, right? It kind of has the Path of Exile feel a little bit in that way, where you're like theory crafting, piecing all these pieces together. And I think it's interesting, and I think there is a crowd for that. And again, I'm not saying that is bad. A lot of people think I'm saying, oh, that sucks. That's a stupid system. I'm not saying that. There are a lot of people that really like that. Straight up. I think for me, with those pieces, I think it's getting a little too much. I think I'm going to too many places where it's like, I have my Paragon board where I'm doing all that, and that has all the conditionals, and then my items have the conditionals, and then my skills have the conditionals, and then there's just too many places where I feel like I would go to maximize and adjust this to be in that way. It's just too much for me. Right? So, I do feel the more you learn, the more that, the more you play it, the more you'll get into that. And you'll be able to feel it out. But I think that will be interesting for me to play through and feel and just see how it goes. I'm not just used to D2 and it's time to try something new. Because again, I go back and I like a lot of older school ARPGs. I like going back and playing Titan Quest and playing Dungeon Siege and playing Sacred and playing these older games. And within a lot of those games, there's just not there's just not that same level of conditional, complexity with it all. Again, just a different style of game, right? That's it. It's just a different style. So you can love this style. There are a ton of people that love Path of Exile. And I've played probably 800 hours of Path of Exile. And I enjoy it, but I also still get lost a little bit when I'm playing. And there's definitely times where I'm like, man, they could use with a little simplification in some of these. It could definitely But it's just bloated. All the league mechanics, all the stuff in there, it's very bloated and it's rough for me. But there's people who understand all of it. You know, go talk to Zizrin. He can give you the full breakdown of every single thing. So it's an interesting combination of like a ton of theory crafting and complexity in designing all of your character, but then getting into the battle and just like spinning and everything just blowing up everywhere and numbers and millions and billions and that's there's like it's like an arcade in the gameplay and then a giant theory craft in the back end. So, I think for the people that want to have probably a less complex Path of Exile, but still kind of get challenged and the blow stuff up and the arcadey feel there, don't mind the damage numbers, don't mind that stuff, like Diablo 3, I think this game is going to hit all that stuff for them. I think it will hit a lot of it. I still, of course, have the question of, even for them, will the end game sustain itself, or will you just feel like I'm just running Nightmare Dungeons over and over and over again, and what's the difference between doing this and a Greater Rift, right? Well, the reason people are hung up on damage numbers is because it makes balancing really difficult, right? If I do 5,000 damage and you do 10,000 damage, all right, we can balance that. You kill things twice as fast as I do, right? And there's a better balance across, right? If the maximum damage anybody's doing is like 15,000, then even on the progression up to 15,000, if I start out doing 100 damage, then I'm doing 1,000 damage, then I'm doing 5,000 damage, there's a good scaling on it, and you feel that scale well. But if you're doing 2 billion damage, and then I'm doing, but on the way there you do 200,000, 2 million, 20 million, 2 billion. Again, it's like nothing, like everything up to that 2 billion is so ridiculously, it doesn't matter. And then you're trying to create a PvP, and it's like now you're trying to balance you doing 2 billion and me doing 200 million, which is a massive difference, and then that guy doing 20 million. And it just, the power creeping from all of that can just makes balance in that way really difficult. And again, it also makes everything scale at such like an exponential scale, which is something you have in like D3, right? It's like Greater Rift 140 versus 141 versus 142. Everything now becomes, you have to get this like one piece of gear or this one whatever that gives you 300, 1,000% or 50,000 more damage, 50,000% more damage to scale you up to that next part. But it's not all relative. Because, again, the difference between 2 billion and 2 million is basically 2 billion. And so then it's like, okay, you're going from doing like 20 damage to doing 20,000 damage or something. The scaling on the numbers with the multiplicative apart is just is tough for scaling purposes. That's really what it is. It's just for scaling. I don't care that you do 2 billion damage. If everything perfectly scaled up, take Diablo 2, you start out doing 20 damage, you end up doing 20,000 damage. Okay, you add 3 zeros. So now start me out doing 20 million damage, and then make me do 2 billion damage at the end, and that's fine. But then it's just a bigger number for whatever reason. So Yeah, it's a bunch of zeros you can round off, but the scaling doesn't round off because you start Diablo 4 doing just a few damage. Anyways, we don't have to do a whole scaling discussion. 3 slide, thanks for that piece. Yeah. I don't know. We're gonna have to really play through and go through to beat the game and go to the end. But we'll see. We shall see.